that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 2016 Year in Review from Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the famous Tom Fennell. Man about town, philanthropist, and electric engineer with a lot of experience all over the world with, what was the highest voltage stuff you ever worked with?
I never worked on real high voltage stuff.
No, you
15
didn't.
kV was probably,
Wow.
well, the convex crossing from Orange and Rockland to Con Edison was 138 kV.
Okay.
And I did work on the cables.
And the convex crossing was under Long
the
Island?
Hudson River.
Under the Hudson River.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're the only person I've known who has put an electric cable under a river.
Well, it's going to happen in Vermont pretty soon.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So this is the Energy Week in Review, and what we did was to go through the year, and you know, we do about 21 items on average, 3 items a day. So you figure in the course of a year we've done a little over 1,000 items.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the 20
The best of the best.
The 20 items that that we consider the most interesting. Not
Some of these items are very well done and in depth.
Yes.
And they're going into far more detail than we can afford to talk about here.
Yep. And in
But
many
there are links.
Yeah, there are links. In many cases, these were ongoing things. Our first item here is just one item in dealing with a gas leak in California, a specific gas leak in California. And it went on and on and on, and it's not the only one. And what I tried to do in most of these things was to get, if a thing showed up many times, I'd try to get something that was at or near the end.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a summary.
Kind of a summary.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you can find these by going to the blog, geoharvey.com, and going to the calendar, but to click back through the months one by one to get to January of last year means you've got to load up 12 calendars.
Yeah.
So
You have to.
the person who's doing it, who's visiting, has to do that. So
But there's links.
there's links, but you go to the blog and there's a calendar in the upper left corner.
Okay.
And it'll say January 2017,
Okay, yep.
and you can click to December. And if you want to go to last January 2016, you have to click through it one at a time.
Okay.
For a user has not got a convenient, and I didn't design it that way. Sorry, it's just that way. Maybe there's a way of doing it that I don't know about, but
But they can read your summary, then click on that.
they have to go to get to the summary. They've got to get there somehow.
Okay.
And that means clicking. Now, in this particular case, Aliso Canyon, A-L-I-S-O, if you type that in for search, then you can go through the search stuff and find, and it might be faster. But the result of the fact that we're doing the more recent stuff means that this first item is in January, but I don't have anything from February or March in this list. So that'll be a little bit of a convenience for people going to this as well.
Well, interesting headline you chose for this, or they chose for this article.
Yeah.
How many cars and burping cows equal a California gas leak?
Yeah.
And they give you the answer.
What's the answer, Tom? I don't have it in front of me.
180 million cows.
180 million cows. Okay. This is
one car driving around the earth 650,000 times.
Somehow I don't think anybody is ever going to do that. Okay, this is from the BBC, and it's January 12th. The methane and other pollutants spewing up gas from a gas well in California is invisible to the naked eye, making it hard to comprehend just how large the leak is. Fortunately, the California Air Resources Board has been taking periodic measurements, and we can make comparisons. They were losing thousands of tons of methane a day. The methane was coming out of this thing so fast that it was coming up through the ground from a break that was way underground. And it was coming up so fast that it blew a crater in the ground. And fortunately, it didn't ignite.
Fortunately. And
Yeah.
they said in this article they had to temporarily relocate 11,000 families.
Yeah. And it was blowing out of the ground for weeks and weeks.
Yeah, I remember each week it was an update. It was
Yeah,
still going on.
absolutely.
It took them a long time to stop the leak.
This was the pressure that this methane was under was something like 3,500 pounds per square inch. And that means, that this is my recollection, it was something like that. That means that it was about a third of the pressure of the chamber of a shotgun when it goes off.
Wow.
Because they were liquefying that methane, and where were they doing that? In an old old oil well.
Yeah.
They
that's
just
where they
pump
put
this
it.
stuff underground and
And so it can leak out again.
so it can leak out again.
I'm looking at this picture of
Yeah.
theirs up there. It looks like there's snow on the ground. And there isn't.
And there isn't.
No, that's just bare rock.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
California.
It's well, it
There's
snows in
parts of
California.
California that snow, but that is not snow.
Yeah. Okay. So should we go on from that?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Okay. We have a slide on this one too, which doesn't really have anything directly to do with it, but this comes from Forest News. That's why this particular slide came up. Center for International Forestry Research.
Well, the headline is the Paris Agreement has been signed. Now what?
Yeah. More than 170 nations, actually, now it's 193, attended the signing ceremony.
We talk about this again
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
Yeah. More than 170 nations attended the signing ceremony at the Paris Climate Agreement at the UN. For the agreement to enter force, at least 55 nations comprising 55% of man-made greenhouse gas emissions had to ratify it. And guess what? They did.
They did, yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but they ratified it relatively quickly.
They expected it would take 5 years.
They did it in what, 3 months?
They ratified it in 5 months.
5 months.
5 months.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing that really got them to act on this very fast was the fact that if they didn't ratify it, they knew that Donald Trump, if he was elected, could just pull out. And they wanted to have it ratified before he could do
They
that.
can't, this is international in scope.
It's international
They can't do
law,
anything.
and
Yep.
it's
So even if we pull out, it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect this.
It's not going to affect this. If we pull out, it's going to cause a lot of mischief. There are countries that are already figuring out the sanctions they're going to use to sanction the United States because of this. And it means that if we pull out, the leadership of the world on this particular issue is going to go to China.
Well, we're going to talk about that too.
We will indeed. Our next item is from the Washington Post. This is June 14th.
High Court leaves intact standards for mercury.
Yeah.
This is a temporary thing, but it's good news.
It is, and it's an interesting thing because it's one of the things that really has a serious effect on coal in the United States.
Sure it does.
The Supreme Court on Monday, this is the Monday before June 14th, left intact a key Obama administration environmental regulation, which, by the way, it had to do that regulation because it was instructed to do so by the courts, refusing to hear an appeal from 20 states seeking to block rules that limit the emissions of mercury and other toxic pollutants from the nation's power plants.
So these regulations are still in effect.
The regulations are in effect, and in order for Donald Trump to be able to stop these regulations, he's going to have to figure out a way to do an end run around the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I don't think he's got it in him.
Not going to be an easy thing to do.
Well, there have been people who have done it, and one of the most notorious was Andrew Jackson, who basically said the Supreme Court can tell us that we don't have the right to relocate these people, but they don't have an army, do they? He didn't use exactly those words, but that was the...
He was a peppery kind of guy.
He was a
wasn't
peppery kind of guy, and he instructed the army to go get the Cherokee and move them to Oklahoma.
Wow.
And that was the Trail of Tears,
Yeah.
and it was done despite the fact that the Supreme Court had said this is illegal.
Wow.
Okay, now in today's
Well, the Cherokee were from, what, North Carolina?
a lot of them were from North Carolina, Georgia, but it was mostly because they were in Georgia. And the problem was there was gold discovered on land that belonged to the Cherokee. This was not reservation land. This was privately owned land. These people had plantations that they ran on that land. If they had been of European descent, they would have had the same problem, except they wouldn't have gone to Oklahoma. But
somebody wanted that
buddies of Andrew Jackson wanted that land, and they got it under eminent domain from the. Basically, what happened was the federal government said, "We're going to pay you for your plantations. We're going to pay for it as plantations. So if it's worth $1 an acre as a plantation, that's what we're going to give you. And the fact that it has gold on that land
doesn't count.
Doesn't count. And we're going to sell it as land that has gold on it and make a lot of money."
Funny, when I studied history, I don't remember that.
Do you remember the coup?
I remember the Trail of Tears, but I don't remember the details.
Do you remember the coup in Rhode Island?
No.
Yeah, there was a coup in Rhode Island.
But I don't remember studying that one either.
They don't put it in history books very often, but it did happen. And it happened because the Constitution of Long Island said you couldn't vote unless you owned a certain amount of property in terms of value of real estate, which meant that only farm owners could vote.
Basically, yeah.
That's what it came down to. And people who had large holdings in towns. Okay, our next item is from June 25th. We've talked about this many times.
We've talked about this at very great length.
This is from
VW U.S. emissions settlement reported to cost $15 billion.
Yep. This is from the BBC. VW was reportedly reached a $15 billion settlement with U.S. car owners after admitting it cheated on emission tests. The deal would offer to repair or buy back affected diesel vehicles and pay owner compensation. The U.S. settlement is still pending approval by a judge, and of course this is just the United States. They did this all over the world.
Worldwide, yeah.
And $15 billion is about 25% of VW's market capitalization.
Now,
so
that's very significant.
That's significant, yeah.
Now they also don't mention that there's fines involved.
Yeah.
Another $20 billion just from fines for the Clean Air Act violation.
This is a company which, by the time it's done, could pay out an amount of money equal to its market capitalization.
It certainly could.
Which could put it out of business, except it won't. Okay.
Car owners, by the way, will still be able to decline the VW offer and sue on their own.
Yeah, good luck.
There's more trouble brewing for Volkswagen.
Well,
sell your Volkswagen stock, people.
No, I think anybody who's going to do that has already done it. Okay, we are up to July 6th and an item from Rolling Stone.
We got a picture there.
We have a picture.
Yeah, let's get this picture.
Well, let's put it up.
Okay.
Exxon lied.
Did
Rex
Exxon
Tillerson lied.
lie about global warming?
Rex Tillerson lied. Is that a surprise? And we'll get back to that one later on in this thing.
There's a whole paragraph here detailing this, but it puts it all in perspective.
Yeah.
The oil giant knew dangers of climate change for decades.
Decades.
And did everything in its power to deny the threat of a warming planet. A series of in-depth reports recently revealed that Exxon, a font of climate skepticism in the 1990s and 2000s, had also been at the cutting edge of climate science as far back as the 1970s.
Well, actually, they first knew about it in 1946.
They probably did.
You know.
But in the 1970s, they knew everything about it.
They knew that they wanted to prevent people from knowing about this because they wanted not to have any threat to their sales, but they also wanted to figure out what parts of the Arctic would have the ice melt so that they could know where to drill for oil.
Probably they knew more, not only more than we know, but more than we can know.
Yeah. Okay. In the case of Exxon, the plaintiffs do not have to show that the company injured a specific victim or conspired to hide what it knew about climate science, just that they lied to their investors.
That's also interesting. They lied to the investors.
Yes.
They didn't lie to anybody else.
What about that? Well, we're going to see them in another lie to investors. Maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe they just changed their minds. Okay.
Well, moving along to
Huffington Post. Look at this.
We've covered this one a lot.
Oh, we love this one.
Covered this one
yes,
a lot.
indeed. This is from July 26th.
A plane just flew around the world without a single drop of fuel.
Don't you love it?
It is a picture from the cockpit.
Yep. More than a year after it took to the skies, Solar Impulse 2 has completed an epic round-the-world journey without burning a single drop of fuel. The revolutionary single-seat solar-powered plane touched down Tuesday morning in Abu Dhabi, that's the Tuesday before July 26th, at the same airport from which it took off back in March of 2015. It would have done this a lot faster, except they had some problems with batteries.
Well, according to this article, the flight of Solar Impulse 2 is a huge achievement for clean energy.
Yeah.
Duh.
Duh.
I'll give you a little quick. We talked about this again, but just to bring you up to date. The aircraft is made mostly of carbon fiber.
Yep.
And is powered by 17,000 solar cells attached to its wings.
Yep.
Which recharge 4 lithium polymer batteries. There's a whole story about the batteries.
Yes.
I don't have
Indeed,
the
there is.
information there.
Yep.
Despite its 236-foot wingspan, which is pretty big. That's about the size of a 747, I think.
I think it's bigger.
It might even be bigger. It weighs roughly the same as a Ford Explorer.
Don't you love
Nearly
it?
200 times lighter than a Ford 747. And it reached a top speed of 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, and this thing would take off and land at speeds that were so low that people assisting to, I think they were making sure that wingtips didn't hit the ground.
They were right along in bicycles.
They'd ride in bicycles holding the wings.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now we're not going to see solar powered aircraft for passengers
not
in the near
not
future.
in the near future.
We
no.
may never.
Well, I don't know. You know,
you
could have maybe you could have solar power aircraft if we would return to blimps. That you could do with solar power.
That you can do right now, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some small planes that are solar powered.
Yes. Yes. Okay, August 5th, from Think Progress.
Now, this is an interesting one, and it just says a lot. Nuclear power is losing money at an astonishing rate.
Astonishing. Half of the existing nuclear power plants are no longer profitable. The New York Times and others have tried to blame the renewable industry, but the admittedly astonishing price drops of renewables are not the primary source of industry woes. Well,
it's fracked gas.
It's partly fracked gas, it's partly renewables. Honestly, my expectation is that ultimately it's going to be renewables, because I expect that the renewables will put the fracked gas out of business.
Eventually.
Eventually.
And it's not going to be very long.
It's not going to be very long. But this is a situation where if you go back to that LCOE, Lazard, Lazard, LCOE.
Like lizard with an A.
Yeah. Version 10.0. You look at that and you look at the price of solar power with batteries, which is $92 per megawatt hour, and you look at the price of nuclear power, and there's no price in that chart that is close to $92 per megawatt hour. So
yeah,
solar,
we just saw that.
yeah,
twice.
Solar in with storage, which means you're talking about 24-hour-a-day solar with instant response, which you don't get with nuclear power, is cheaper than nuclear power. So why would we build a nuclear power plant?
Investors. Insiders.
It's because people want to have big business. That's why.
Yeah.
And, you know, we saw during 2016, we saw the Hinkley C plant go up at unbelievably high priced electricity.
We'll be talking about that in a little while, too.
Right. So.
Yeah, this is, that Hinkley plant still astounds me.
It still isn't built, and it
still
might
isn't
not be built.
And I wouldn't bet it that it will be.
Yeah. Okay, our next item is from Interesting Engineering, and it's August 13th.
Scotland holds the largest oil reserve in the European Union, but proved that they don't need it. This is interesting.
Don't you love this? Scotland is pledging to reach 100% renewable sustainability for energy production by the year 2020.
That's quick.
That's quick. A reasonable goal after meeting 100% of its electricity demand through wind power alone for a full day. Scotland is believed to have the largest oil reserves in Europe, but has proven they largely don't need it.
Yeah, these oil reserves are underwater. Aren't
They're underwater. They're in the North Sea, and of course Norway has got big reserves up there too.
Yeah.
And Norway is divesting of fossil fuel ownership.
Yeah, they are.
They've got among the biggest oil reserves in the world, but they're divesting of.
Divesting.
Does this tell you something? I mean,
Well, Scotland has been a leader in alternative energy, even though they got a lot of oil.
So is
And
Norway.
they've been a leader in oil.
Yeah, and so is Norway.
And so is Norway.
Yeah, interesting that these people seem to have come to the same conclusion.
Well, Scotland also has tidal, solar, and hydro,
Yes,
in addition to wind.
and Norway is
It has the same, I think.
Norway has got a huge amount of. Norway is
Geothermal.
no, that's Iceland.
They got a lot of hydro.
Norway has a lot of hydro. Norway, as I recall, is like 97% renewable now, largely because of its hydro.
And they built those hydro plants a long time ago.
A long time ago. I mean, when we started this show, which was in November of what, 2013?
Seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, it does. Albania was already 100% renewable.
Were they then?
Yeah, because of a hydro plant. And the fact that they didn't use a lot of electricity.
They're not a very large country.
They are not all that big. Okay, our next item is from E-News Park Forest.
I've got a picture up here.
This is you've heard of a bad hair day. This is a bad weather day.
The set that captured here is road closed due to weather.
Right.
And this is an example of hypocrisy, really. The Louisiana climate deniers, these are the legislators,
Yes.
who refused Sandy victims, who refused relief for Sandy victims, now want federal flood relief.
Yeah, of course.
They said, you can't have it up in New Jersey, but we want it here.
Yeah, as residents of Louisiana this week struggled to recover from a 1,000-year flood, probably the first 1,000-year flood that will be, replaced by another 1,000-year flood in a decade. One of the worst floods in modern history, there is a chance that federal aid will not be forthcoming thanks to a trio of Louisiana Republicans who, back in 2013, voted against helping victims of another storm, Hurricane Sandy. And I look at those things and I can't say ouch enough. It's just like, it makes me cringe to see those boats and ships. I guess those are ships. Yeah, they'd have to be ships. Do you know the difference between a boat and a ship?
Well, in the Navy, a boat was something you could carry on board a ship.
That's right. That's what it is. A ship can have boats on it but those things on that concrete barrier in the middle there, I would think that their backs would be broken.
I would think they probably are.
Those things are probably totaled.
They're fishing boats, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I'm speaking of the
and
blue
all the
ones.
stuff behind them. My God, that's just
Wreckage.
Wreckage, yeah.
I was living in Massachusetts within 100 yards of the shore. I was on a peninsula surrounded by a tidal estuary, and when I was there when Hurricane Bob hit and the perfect storm, both of which had very similar results. But I had a neighbor who got up on the morning after one or the other of those and found that they had a yacht in their backyard.
Finders keepers.
I don't think it's finders keepers. Anyway, it's finders keepers if the people don't remove it.
Well, it's interesting because these guys are obviously spouting ideology.
Ideology.
If the idea of climate change goes against your ideology,
Yes.
you deny the science.
And if your constituents tell you, I don't care about the ideology, I want the money, then you go for the money.
Bingo.
That was August 14th, by the way. From CNN, we got another item on September 13th, and this I think is kind of important, but it's easy to lose sight of the importance.
Well, this is a good story.
It is.
We've done this a couple of times and
Yeah.
talked about it. It's a good story.
It's a good story.
Meet the mom, litigating the, quote, biggest case on the planet.
Yep. Julia Olson is litigating what might be considered the most important court case in the United States. She is helping 21 kids, some as young as 9 years old, sue the Obama administration, and now it's no longer the Obama administration, it's going to be Donald Trump.
She's still suing now.
Yes, she's still suing over insufficient action on climate change. Olson will attempt to take their case for the future. And this is a case that doesn't sound like it's worth very much, because it's just 21 kids saying, you're threatening our future. But when you consider the implications of it, it's the kind of thing that could go to the Supreme Court, and as conservative as it might be, the Supreme Court could say, yes, you do have to consider the future of these kids. You are not allowed to destroy their future.
That's the fear, I think.
That's
the fear of these guys.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to mention, this is a very long and detailed human interest story.
Yeah, it is.
And the article has little bios of the kids and everything. And it took me a long time to read it because I was just fascinated by it.
Yes.
So do they have access to the link?
Does who have
The
access?
people watching the show?
To the link at CNN, and it's on September 13th.
So you're going to have to Google.
Oh, you could go to my blog, or you could do a Google of Julia Olson.
But it's on your blog.
It's on my blog.
They can click.
They can click.
This is well worth reading.
You'd have to go to September 13th, and then just look in the. This is in the opinion section, which is the first section
yep.
coming up.
This is well worth reading. It really
It's
is.
worth reading.
I really got a kick
Has a
out of
picture of Julia Olson sitting there.
Yeah, pictures of all the kids.
And pictures of the kids.
They range in age from 9 to 20.
Yeah, and they are this particular, and they're not the only ones either. This has been
It's
heard.
a class action thing. Kind of thing.
Well, there are other cases. A case that was similar to this went through the court system it went to the Supreme Court of Oregon, and the Supreme Court.
Again with the same lawyer.
I don't know.
She's from Oregon.
Oh, okay. She got the Supreme Court of Oregon to say, yeah, you've got to shut down coal plants. Sorry.
These kids, most of them come from Oregon.
Yeah.
But they're also from Florida, New York, Louisiana, Hawaii, Alaska. She gathered them together.
She got them together. It's a really interesting story, and it's worth looking at, as you said. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica, and this is from the 21st of September.
U.S. and China fossil fuel subsidies exceed $20 billion annually. That's obscene.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen the United States actually say how much money it's spending on the fossil fuels industry. And as an outcome of the recent G20 meeting in China, both China and the United States volunteered to publish peer reviews of their current fossil fuel subsidies. Together, the two countries are annually providing over $20 billion in inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. Of this, $8.1 billion comes from the United States and $14.5 billion from China. The United States is spending $8.1 billion a year on subsidies for the richest business sector in the world.
Yep.
Why are we doing that?
It's been going on for 100 years.
It's been going on for 100 years. Why are we doing that? This is
Politics.
5 times the amount of
It's
money
politics.
this is 5 times the amount of money that's going into renewables. And the money that's going into renewables, half of it is going into ethanol.
Well, what we're hearing a lot is how horrible it is that we're subsidizing renewables.
Yes.
But nobody talks about the fossil fuel subsidies.
Yes.
I mean, the biggest of which is the oil depletion allowance. Well, once you sold your oil and now they're giving you a tax deduction for it.
They get a tax deduction because you've run out of oil on the land that you leased from them. Now, one of the things that is involved in this, and it's not a subsidy, but it's nevertheless, it gives you an idea of how tricky things can get. The United States, when it leases out coal land, mm-hmm. it gets an amount of money that's based on the amount of money that the coal is sold for.
Oh, is that so?
Yes. So what does the coal company do?
They sell it to themselves.
Yeah, with that,
at a low price.
They sell it to themselves at a low price. They set up a subsidy which has no business except to buy coal and sell coal.
Yep.
They buy coal really, really, really cheap
Yep.
Because they can.
Yeah.
Because it's sold to them really, really, really cheap by the company that owns them.
Yeah.
And then they sell it at a price. So if the coal is going to sell for $100 a ton, and this intermediate company, and the company is supposed to give 10% to the U.S. government, that means the government would get $10 a ton. But if the intermediate company buys it for $20 a ton, then the government gets $2, and the company, instead of getting $90, would get $98.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to the taxpayer? Well, they get they get coal for Christmas.
Interesting sub-story here. These U.S. fossil fuel subsidies are more or less baked into the cake.
Yep.
And it's going to take tremendous action by Congress to get rid of them, which isn't going to happen.
Well, we
China
don't know that.
at least has a timeline for reform of these subsidies.
Yeah.
We don't.
We don't have a timeline, but at some point we have to stop these subsidies. They just have to stop. They have to stop.
Well, I agree with you, but...
And if we stop the subsidies, guess what? We could do that instead of having a carbon tax.
That's probably true.
I mean, it would help. And that's the kind of thing that could appeal to taxpayers. Instead of having a carbon tax, we're just going to stop giving them extra money that they don't need. And if they stopped subsidizing fossil fuels, but also stopped subsidizing renewables, guess what would happen? Well, should we go on? To answer the question, fossil fuels are not competing successfully, even though they're getting more money from subsidies. So you take the subsidies away, they're going to compete less successfully. Take it up to the Koch brothers. See if they support removing all subsidies or just subsidies on their competitors. Okay.
Well, there's a picture, I guess, it went with that article.
It went with the article about China. That is a wind farm in Inner Mongolia, which is part of China.
As opposed to Outer Mongolia.
Which is not part of China. That's right.
Okay. Back to Hinkley Point.
Back to Hinkley Point.
Ministers sign go-ahead for a nuclear power plant. This was what, September? This
item appears, by the way, the dates here are the dates that you go to find the item. They're the dates the item appeared in my blog, but they almost inevitably came from the previous day's news, or possibly the day before that, and they refer to items that didn't happen necessarily on the previous day either. This came from Clean Technica on September 21st. As an outcome of the recent G20, this was from The Guardian on September 30th.
Yeah.
The UK has signed an £18 billion contract with France and China to build the Hinkley Point C nuclear power station, giving the final go-ahead to construction in the site in Somerset. The deal was finalized at a low-key ceremony in London, just 2 months after Theresa May put the entire project under review.
Well, this is weird because they're selling that fuel, part of the contract, at above market price.
Yeah.
For years.
Yeah. This is
politics.
This is politics, and there's one other thing too that I've read speculated about this, and that is that the UK is willing to put so much money into this because they can conceal military payments for nuclear power programs in that.
Hide stuff. Yeah,
they can hide stuff in there. But nevertheless, $18 billion pounds, I'm sorry, and the price for the electricity is just a little bit above double the going rate for electricity in the UK, and it's guaranteed for 35 years.
That's sweet.
Yeah. You can get something that you don't need and don't deserve. And, it's hardly a surprise that nuclear power is not making any headway. I mean, we've got,
no surprise.
Right now in the United States, we entered 2016 with 2 plants scheduled for closing. Mm-hmm. We left 2016 with 4 plants scheduled for closing. 1 plant was brought online, the first one in 30 years.
Yeah, we just barely mentioned that one.
Yep, and 1 plant that had not been announced to be closed in 2016 was. That was Fort Calhoun. Mm-hmm. And Fort Calhoun, by the way, is being replaced by wind power. So, you know, the world is changing. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry, it's changing. And you can complain about the wind not always blowing, but it always does blow. And if you think that it...
Somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. And if you think that it isn't always blowing somewhere, you don't understand. It's that simple. And Fort Calhoun is more expensive than solar plus batteries, and we've been dealing with that, so just forget it. Go away. Don't watch this show.
Go away.
Okay, our next item is from October 5th. I'm being a grump, by the way. And this is from Bloomberg BNA.
Canada to require nationwide carbon pricing in 2018.
Now, this came as kind of a surprise. Canada will impose a federal price on emissions of carbon dioxide nationwide in 2018, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced. The policy approach would push tougher limits on provinces that already use a carbon tax or a program for cap and trade, and would require new major programs for other parts of the country. Now, one of the provinces, and I don't remember which one, went to Trudeau and said, look, we want to do this a different way. We want to do, I think it might have been Manitoba, Saskatchewan, but it was one of the western provinces. They said, we want to do this a different way. We want to do carbon capture and sequestration. And Trudeau basically said, I don't care how you do it, we want to stop the carbon dioxide from going into the atmosphere. But
well, what he quoted, this is a quote from him, because pollution crosses borders, all provinces must do their share.
yes, yes. And by the way, carbon capture and sequestration, there is a plant that is doing it, and it's doing it very badly.
Yeah.
And then there was an announcement in the last few days about a plant in India that does carbon capture and sequestration, and they're actually turning it into a useful product.
Okay.
Baking soda.
Okay.
All right, now here's a little problem with this before you start jumping for joy.
There's more baking soda than they'll ever need.
Yeah, we aren't going to use enough baking soda to make a dent in carbon emissions. Okay, our next item comes from the BBC.
I love this picture.
I love the picture, but I hate the article.
Let's get this picture up.
Yeah, let's do that.
Picture.
It's a great picture of a lynx. You see how big his feet are? Look at his feet.
Yeah.
Those are big feet. That's the difference between a lynx and a bobcat. That lynx's feet.
Well, bobcat's got big feet.
Yeah, but bobcat feet are only about half the size of a lynx feet.
Well, bobcat's smaller than lynx.
I thought they were about the same size. Well, anyway, let's go with the story. This is from the BBC.
World wildlife falls by 58% in 40 years.
Global wildlife populations have fallen by 58% since 1970, a report by the Zoological Society of London and the World Wildlife Fund says. The Living Planet assessment suggests that if the trend continues, that decline would reach 2/3 among all vertebrates. This is fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals by 2020. And I want to tell you, the trend's
coming soon.
We're not going to stop that. Habitat loss, wildlife trade, pollution, and climate change are among the causes. Now, of those, I want to point out, habitat loss, pollution, those two mostly come from fossil fuels.
Yep.
Climate change is coming from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels is causing most of this loss. Wildlife trade, overfishing, things of that nature. Yeah, there's a bit of poaching.
The bigger animals are getting like elephants.
Yeah, serious problem. But the big problem here that we have is fossil fuels. 2/3 of all species, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds says almost 3/4 of our seed bird populations have disappeared in the last 50 years. How long were we going to do this?
There is how would I say it? The article is very pessimistic.
Yep.
And is the takeaway from there that it's not quite as pessimistic. These trends are declines in the number of animals and wildlife populations. They are not extinctions.
Yes, that's correct.
By and large, they are not vanishing. And that presents us with an opportunity to do something about
We
it.
can do something, we can save them, we can bring them back, but we've got to act. We can't
We
do it
have
by
to do
sitting
something.
around and
We have
saying,
to do
no
something."
wind turbines on mountaintops, people,
Right.
because doing that just destroys habitat, destroys animals, destroys birds. The wind turbines, for every bird they kill, save about 20, or 30. Okay, our next item comes from Clean Technica, and it is on October 30th. That last item, by the way, from the BBC was on the 27th of October.
$1.30 in unpaid health and societal costs for every gallon of gasoline sold in the United
You
States.
burn a gallon of gasoline, you're causing somebody $1.30 worth of problems.
Absolutely.
Okay. According to a study from the American Lung Association in California, the unaccounted for health and societal costs of burning a gallon of gasoline total $1.30. This means that if these costs were accounted for in the price of gasoline, then pricing that gasoline would be at least $1.30 per gallon higher than it currently is. And that, if we taxed it as a carbon tax, would mean that we're actually paying for it at the pump. But instead of doing that, we're paying for it in the hospital. Okay? And just so people
And a
know.
quick takeaway from this thing. If
Go
they
ahead.
did change this and put this increase realistically into the price, it would result in the avoidance of more than 400 premature deaths a year, 900 missed school days, and 29,000 missed days of work. That's just for California.
All right. Now they went into some interesting data, and I had to go into a link in this article in Clean Technica. This is in October 30th. I went into this and I found the actual cost to Vermonters.
Yeah.
And the actual cost.
There was a graph in this.
There's a graph, but I went further and I got the actual cost because the graph doesn't really bring it home very well. It's just a graph. What the American Lung Association did was they said, okay, there are 10 states in the United States where people can get state incentives to buy electric vehicles. So they went into those states for the study and figured out what the cost per person was in those states for our use of something that we could avoid and would be helped to avoid. And what they found, those states, by the way, are California, Oregon, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. So they're mostly in the Northeast.
Well, there's some kind of a compact among
There's a
the states.
compact among those states. And what they found was the state that has the highest cost per person in the United States for the societal costs of gasoline is Vermont.
Is it really?
Yes. And Vermont pays $330 million a year.
You mean Vermonters?
Vermonters,
Yeah.
which is $480 per person. Which means
Just for medical costs.
this is for men and other societal costs. So if you have a family of 5, you're losing $2,400 a year because of some people just this is something
People getting sick.
People getting sick, and we could, this is money that you are losing because somebody is burning gasoline in a car, and it doesn't count the effects of home heating oil, which we could also avoid, and it doesn't take into account the costs of industry or energy production, which is really kind of non-existent in Vermont. But $480 per person per year, that's why we need a carbon tax. Because people are doing this and other people are suffering and nobody's connecting those two.
So they're paying for it anyhow.
They're paying for it. Everybody's paying for this. The only way you could avoid paying this money would be if you don't have health insurance and you don't pay taxes. All right? Otherwise, you're paying money. This is costing you money. And, but if we just stopped subsidizing fossil fuels, maybe that would go away. but we're subsidizing fossil fuels. We're paying them $8 billion a year, more than $8 billion a year, to put us in the hospital.
Isn't that sweet?
Isn't that sweet? And Rex Tillerson is going to be the Secretary of State because he's really good at it. And they said today that they're going to give him an amount of money. I think it was $180 million golden parachute.
Yeah, this is
because talk about corrupt. Donald Trump's government isn't even existing, and it's already the most corrupt that ever existed.
Just that one guy probably equals everything else. $186 million?
I think it was $180 million.
Wow.
Okay. Now, should we go on to our November 5th, also Clean Technica?
We're getting toward the end of the year.
We are.
Paris Agreement on Climate takes effect worldwide. This is a sequel to what we talked about in this week.
That's right. Remember, we said 55 countries at least, and 55% of carbon emissions, and it was going to take 5 years, but it took 5 months. And it's done. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change became international law on Friday, November 4th, 2016, about 20 years after they started working on it. Exactly 30 days ago, which was October 5th, it crossed both national and emission thresholds needed to enter into force. The agreement has 98 parties at the time of this was written, representing 70% of carbon emissions.
It's international law, it's an international treaty. If we pull out, it doesn't matter, we're still obligated by this law.
That's right, and that means that these countries can say, okay, we're going to put, we're going to have, what are they called?
Sanctions?
Sanctions against the United States, and they're already planning them. Okay, we have to move ahead. We've got a lot in December. New research from Ohio State University determined that a calving event creating an enormous iceberg in the western Antarctica in 2015 was even more notable than first thought. It was the result of a deep subsurface rift that formed approximately 20 miles inland, and it implies that the glacier is deteriorating much faster than thought. That picture...
So it's been happening, but nobody knew it.
Yeah, that picture is a picture of a glacier breaking apart 20 miles from the sea. It's sliding into the sea. Mm-hmm. And when it does, the sea levels will rise by 11 feet.
I got 10 feet. You want to argue?
Okay, 10 feet, sorry, maybe.
Well, what is 11 feet going to mean? It's going to mean New York City's gone. It's going to mean Miami Beach is gone. It's going to mean New Orleans is gone. I don't know about the West Coast.
But we've got 100 million people in this country who are going to be affected by it, and it means that there's going to be a lot of people moving. I don't know how long it's going to take for this thing to break off and go into the sea, but it means it could. I could imagine that it could take 100 years. But I said when we did this in the show that I thought it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years, the time that it takes for people, and I might have expressed this badly, but for the amount of time that it takes for people to understand that they have to move away from the sea to the point where the point at which people start to understand that, the time that it will take before it turns into a panic is going to be fairly short, I think.
I would think. Once they realize it, they're going to say, holy something or other.
Right.
We got to get out of here.
We got to get out of here. And all of a sudden, the value of Donald Trump's beachfront... It's happening
in Miami already.
Beachfront property.
They're getting
sunny
day flooding right downtown Miami.
At every spring tide, every other week, they have flooding problems.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay.
Well, they're raising the highways right now.
Yeah, and it's not going to be enough because they're only raising them 3 feet. Okay, Clean Technica.
Let's move on to the next one.
Clean Technica, December 2nd.
Alberta's tar sands province. Okay, Alberta's tar sands province to auction 5 gigawatts of wind. Kind of a clumsy sentence.
Yes,
there.
It is. The Canadian province of Alberta, known for its notoriously dirty oil sands, has just made a symbolically significant about-face on energy policy with potentially major implications for North American wind power. First up is a tender for 5 gigawatts of wind power. Alberta will also separately pay its coal-burning plants $1 billion to shut down.
That's very interesting.
isn't it?
Well, one of the things that they're starting to realize is Alberta has a lot of wind.
Yeah,
And the other thing is there's been an election change.
yeah.
There was a major election change, first time in 80 years that the Conservative Party in Alberta got knocked out.
Well, on top of that, they can sell the right to build wind farms for a price, and then they can use the money from that to shut down the coal.
That's exactly what they're doing.
And
That's what this
okay, so you get it for free. Okay, we got to move on. Next item, Power Magazine. Got to power on. I love this picture.
Oh, we're getting ahead.
We're getting ahead.
Yeah, we
Oh
got
yeah,
one more.
okay. Los Angeles Times, December 5th.
Through climate change denial, we're ceding global leadership to China. Now, we've been talking about this.
Yeah.
This is far more significant than it sounds. You really got
And
to
it makes
think
you
about
wonder
this.
about people like Rex Tillerson and Donald Trump and all the rest of those. What are and the Koch brothers, and you know, are these people really patriotic Americans, or are they just interested in the bottom line and to heck with everybody else and to heck with the future of this
It kind
country?
of seems that way.
Sure does. China was no more prepared for the results of the American election than the United States, but it has been quick to size up the environmental implications of a Trump victory, and officials in Beijing are contriving to cast China in a fresh leadership role. They're taking over moral leadership of the world.
We're letting them do it.
And we're letting them do it. Thank you very much.
Takeaway from the article. Now, China is betting that clean energy and green technology will be what powers the global economy of the 21st century.
And
it
they are making so much money on this.
Yeah.
China installed more wind turbines last year than everybody else combined. And Donald Trump
I'm going
says
to put you up so you can say that.
China installed more wind turbines last year than the rest of the world combined. And Donald
And how
Trump,
much do they pay for the fuel?
they don't pay for the fuel. And Donald Trump says they're just saying climate change is real because they're trying to put the Americans into a position of not being able to compete.
I think the Americans have put themselves in a position of
Donald
not being able
Trump
to-
and Rex Tillerson are putting the United States into a position where it can't compete because China is taking over leadership, not just of the moral issue, but economically. And it is putting them into a position where they've already got economic advantages, commercial advantages, industrial advantages, because they've got people who are willing to work for small amounts of money. But on top of that, they're taking over this situation where they're going to have energy independence, and they're going to do it without having to pay for fuel. And what that means is, as the United States is stuck with Rex Tillerson and the Koch brothers, we're going to be paying for fuel, and if we can't get it locally, we're going to have to import it.
And the Chinese going to have a hell of a competitive advantage.
And a military advantage too.
And a military advantage, right?
We're giving away the store, and in the meantime, the Republican Party's platform said, "Oh, by the way, we want to sell all the federal land," and they didn't say except national parks. They just said all the federal land, and they didn't say, and by the way, we're not going to sell Arlington Cemetery.
You don't think about that, do you?
No. Okay. We're up to this, Power Magazine.
Coming back locally.
Sorry, Power Magazine. And we're up to
Get this
December
picture up
13th. The Block Island Wind Farm is supplying power to the grid, making it America's first offshore wind facility. Deepwater Wind Project partners have commissioned the 30-megawatt installation off the coast of Rhode Island, and it is now delivering power to New England's electric grid via a 20-mile-long submarine cable. And you know, just to show you how absolutely bizarre reporting in the United States is, you've got a whole section of the press, mostly from the Heritage Foundation and Breitbart News and organizations like that, that say, these people are selling electricity for 40 cents a kilowatt hour on Block Island. And what they don't tell you is they've just reduced the price of power on Block Island by 40% because it used
they were generating with diesels, right?
Okay, we are up to December 17th, and this is that same thing that actually we talked about this in the weekly
Yeah.
thing, and we didn't present it. And I told people you should come here. Here it is. This is from Solar Industry, December 17th.
Costs of solar and energy storage kept dropping in 2016. Well, we've been talking about this
Yes.
as it has been happening.
That's right. December 17th, Lazard Limited's levelized cost of electricity analysis compares the cost of various generation technologies. Its latest LCOE 10.0 shows the cost decline of generating electricity from solar PV was steeper than decreases among other forms of electricity in 2016, with utility scale technologies down 11%. Oh, you know what? This chart doesn't go with this, but that's okay. You can leave it up. Last year. In other words, the
This
price
goes with the next one.
next article. The two articles kind of go together, so let's just leave it there. Or you can take it off if you want. It's up to you.
Put us up there.
But anyway, what this is saying is the cost of electricity from solar power entering this year, the cost of electricity, the lowest cost electricity was from wind. Now, a lot of people who are climate deniers, professional climate deniers, don't like to admit that. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning of the year, the lowest cost electricity was from wind, and solar was not second lowest. It was kind of tied with natural gas for second, or maybe it was third. Now, solar power has gone to a point where it is cheaper than wind. Wind is cheaper than natural gas. Natural gas is much cheaper than coal or nuclear.
And solar and storage have not reached the bottom yet.
Oh no, not even close. Not even close. My bet is that we're going to see the cost of storage for batteries, just batteries, decline by 50% in the next 2 to 3 years, because that gigafactory is coming online. But I've been seeing
and new
technology coming along that is just amazing.
Flow batteries haven't even begun to be.
No, and you know, we see these.
That's got tremendous potential.
Zinc iron flow batteries. It's
Yeah.
like the big problem with flow batteries used to be that vanadium was expensive, and most of them had vanadium, or
they found a cheaper way to do it.
Or they were filled with corrosive materials like bromides and iodides. And I got to tell you, I've worked with iodides. Mm-hmm. I saw a 7/16. I think it was a 7/16 diameter 316 stainless steel shaft dissolve.
Wow.
In 10 minutes. Because
in what kind of?
Somebody was making an iodide compound, and they misweighed the iodine going in.
Oh boy.
So you had some hydriatic acid, and it just ate that stuff apart. And this stuff will attack.
Imagine what it'll do to your teeth.
Actually, probably nothing. It doesn't. You know, hydriatic acid. It's one of those funny things. You stir it with an iron or stainless steel paddle, it'll dissolve the paddle. You stir it with a wood paddle, no problem. Yeah. You drop it on the floor, it'll dissolve the concrete. You drop it on your skin, no problem. You just wash it off.
So?
Yeah.
Strange stuff.
Yeah, strange stuff. Okay, that slide that we were looking at is for the next item.
Let's bring it up.
And let's bring it up. It's right there already. We might as well show everybody. It's not a secret anymore.
Good year for the U.S. solar market.
Oh boy, was it ever. PV Magazine USA, here you go. Okay, we knew that 2016 was going to be a very good year for the U.S. solar market. However, no one could say exactly how good. Now the DOE's Energy Information Administration, which by the way I think is right about 50% of the time, and that's when it's looking at things that have already happened, so this is probably right, posted some of the first concrete numbers of the year. EIA estimates that the U.S. will have installed 9.5 gigawatts of utility-scale solar power in 2016, and I want to point out...
They're not even talking about the rooftop solar.
Rooftop solar is traditionally about 40% of the market, which means we might actually have installed 13 gigawatts of solar last year.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
13, you know, I mean, okay, 9.5 gigawatts of solar, 8 of natural gas, 6.8 of wind, 1.1 of nuclear, 3.3 rather of hydro, 0.3 of petroleum and others. There was more solar than there was natural gas and nuclear combined. And you know what?
We're out of time.
We're out of time. That was our last item. So there you go. So you can put us up and we can say have a good year. Have a lovely new year. This is George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios.
As it will.